Hello, good afternoon and welcome. Excuse me. My name is Michele Jutrisa and I'm an independent demonstrator with Stamping Up here in New South Wales, Australia. Thank you very much for joining me today. Please jump on, say hello. I'm just switching on the chat so I can see who pops up. Thanks for joining me. Today I thought we'd have another play with the alcohol. The Stamp and Blends and some pure alcohol and see what sort of backgrounds we can create. I have been having a little bit of a play this morning and I've come up with an idea for a card. I'm not going to guarantee it's going to be exactly the same. I don't know how it's going to turn out because that's one of the beauties of playing with alcohol. You don't know what you're going to get. So let me just flip my camera down so you can see my desk. And I'm going to show you what I was doing this morning and just to, I suppose, explain a few little things that maybe I sort of didn't quite explain well enough last time or whatever again this time. So let me just bring my desk up and let me bring in my bits and pieces. As you can see, I've been having quite a bit of a play. Because I had one original idea that I was wanting to do today for a card, and to be honest, it wasn't working out the way I was hoping. I'm just trying to see whether I can pull out for you what I ended up creating, but we're not going to use it, but just so then you can see. Okay, let me just pop these back down here. They're out of the row. Okay, so again, what I've been thinking about over the last week or two is a way of creating a vellum flower that had a stamped image on it as well as the alcohol ink as well. Now, let me just grab a piece of white cardstock so you can actually see this. And you can see there with that one, it's got a stamped image. Now, being vellum, let me explain what vellum is. Bit of a history on vellum. Vellum used to be calf skin back in, early England or, a few hundred years ago. Vellum was a very, very stretched out calf skin, and then they used to scrub it down until it became very, very, very thin. Now, that's just a very sort of a simple way of explaining it. You can find more details on vellum on the internet. So it was something that was semi-sheer. It was something that they used to use for writing on, but it was made from calf skin. The vellum we have today is made from cellulose. So it is actually made from fibre, plant fibre. And that was about as much information I could find very quickly today. So it has got, it's not synthetic, but it's not porous. So it's not going to, water and that is going to, may eventually absorb into it, but as a general rule, it'll sit on top of it. And that's why it's so good when we do the alcohol, because the alcohol inks and the alcohol does not absorb into it. It will dry on the surface, but not absorb into the actual fibre. So this was my first play. And what I was trying to work out here is, number one, what if I stamped in Memento ink onto vellum? Because I did say the other time, I think in my last one, hello Leslie, how are you? Thanks for joining us. My last video on this, that you could stamp on it with stays on ink, and that should work, but not to use Memento. And I thought, but then now let me get this right. When you're using alcohol markers on cardstock, you need to use Memento ink, but on stays on, Memento takes a long time to dry. And as you can see here, I stamped this one here in Memento, and then I got my finger and I smudged it because it's sitting on the surface and it's not absorbing. But when you want to use alcohol blends, you want to use the water-based inks, okay? That's when you're using it on your basic white cardstock. So I thought, okay, well, that's not going to work. We don't want our work to be smudged. So I thought, okay, what if we stamped with stays on? And we know that Stays On doesn't work with your alcohol markers. So I did a little bit of a test, and yes, this one here is Stays On, and when I put a bit of alcohol, this is just the plain alcohol that I use, and I put a little bit on that, and you can see that that has actually blurred. So no, you can't use alcohol. So Stays On is great for on vellum, but it's not great for when you're using your alcohol. So the other way around that was to colour the back of my vellum and get it into, you know, sort of a colourway that I was interested in or happy with, and then flip it over and stamp on the wrong side with your Stays On. So it just means that this side here is very bright and the colours are quite vibrant, but when you flip it over and stamp and make this your right side, you've got a slightly more muted. So that was just one way of getting away with that, and this is what I ended up with. So what I've done here with this piece here, I've coloured my ink on the wrong side, flipped over my paper, and then stamped with my Stays On ink and die cut it from there. So that's a card that I'm sort of working on, and that was one thing that I played with today. This is the one we did last week, okay, or the one I was showing you, but then did another one to sort of say this is what we can do. And you can see the colours are quite vibrant on the right side, but when I flip it over, it's a little bit matted on the other side. I do recommend, if you're going to be doing something like this, to write on the side that you're putting the alcohol ink, right side, wrong side, alcohol, whatever you want to put on there, so you know which one's which. This morning I was also playing with, this is Melon Mumbo in the dark, and I was playing with also achieving different effects with using the pump, the air pump. So this one here, okay, which is very much similar to what I had done the other week, I put my colour on there, put my alcohol on there, and I had the tip of my pump quite close to my vellum. So that was where I was able to, when it blow it back on itself, and I got these lovely markings where the ink was drying on itself. Now this one over here is a bit different. Again, I put my markers on my paper, and then I put my alcohol on there. But when I use this one here, I actually had my pump up a lot higher, probably about 10 to, yeah, probably 5 to 10 centimetres above, which gave me a little bit more of a wispier effect. Still got those lines, but not probably as intense as this side here. So really what I'm trying to get at is, if you're going to have a go at this, is play around. Get yourself some vellum and some alcohol and play and see what you can do to create different effects. So then I continued. So the next one I did was this one. And this one here, I basically put the pump aside and I put some Melon Mumbo and some alcohol, and I just moved it around and let it air dry. Now, I will admit I ended up getting my heat gun and just giving it a bit of a blast with that. But you get again, it's sort of, if you're just letting it air dry, you're getting those lovely edges, but you're getting more of a wispy effect. So all I did there was just move my paper around. So I was moving all that ink around and letting it dry. On this side, what I did here, is here I just sort of coloured the ink on the paper, like just a circular portion. With this one here, I did a stripe of ink up here, put my alcohol on it, and again, let it air dry, but again, just moving my paper around to create an effect. And it created this really nice whispery effect. That gave me an idea. So on to the next one. I grabbed 3 colours. I grabbed Pumpkin Pie in the dark, Daffodil Delight in the dark, and the dark Azure Afternoon. So I grabbed those 3. And first off, I laid on some Daffodil Delight and put some alcohol into that, moved that around. But I decided I was working too close to my edge of the paper. I needed to move it into the center. So I put that one aside and I came back, and this is what I ended up creating. So I started with my lightest color first, which is the Daffodil Delight, popped it into the middle. But with this one here, this one I was trying to put one color at a time. So that's where I got that line in between. So I put my Daffodil Delight down first, then dried it. Then I laid down my pumpkin pie, and I got this defining line where the two colors were blending together. With this one here, I laid down all three colors and then put my alcohol on top, again using just moving it around a little bit. And the colors tended to blend a little bit more and gave me a little bit more of a washed out look. So I thought that would look great if you had a water scene. So you've got your sunset hitting the water, or you've got a beach scene, turn it over, and I've got my beach and the sky above. And I thought, gee, that makes a really nice effect. So I kept playing. And this is what I ended up with. So with this one here, I have actually used the pump because I've created some lines. But I've done this one here. Probably, I'm trying to remember now. I think I did put down each color a little bit more individually. And then I embossed over the top of it. Now, there's lots of pluses and against with doing what I've done here. I've got a little bit of warping. My vellum is not sitting as nice and flat as I probably would like it. I put it onto a piece of basic white cardstock before I did the embossing. So with the glue, because I used the adhesive sheets to glue it down. So with the glue and the vellum and with a heat gun, the heat gun will cause your vellum to warp a little bit, and I think also too the glue, it probably warped that a little bit. So it doesn't sit 100% flat. It's not too bad, but I thought we'd give this another go. So with just playing around with colours. Now when you're choosing your colours, please be very careful. I recommend doing no more than 3 colours because you don't want to have mud. You want to choose colours that are going to blend together well. So the blue and the yellows blending together gave me this sort of green tone that I have up through here. I really loved the texture I got in this, even though it was just a little bit of texture, just by using the pump a little bit just to help moving things about. But anyway, I thought we'd give this another try. So this is really a hit and miss because we're just going to play with this and see what we come up with. The stamp set I've used is Creative Haven, which is actually a pretty good name for it because we're being creative today. We're having a go and playing. What else have I done that's a little bit different? I did start off using the paintbrush and the alcohol, but I wanted more alcohol. The more alcohol you have on it, the more colours you're going to get moving. So I didn't try this one earlier, but I found a little bottle that I had, which has got a very fine tip nib on it. So I've put some alcohol into there. Make sure you put your lid onto it because that will evaporate. And I thought, well, we're going to give this a go as putting down our alcohol. Glass surface will work fine, but of course, if you're worried about a big mess, then put something down on top of this, whether it be a craft mat or something like that that you can use. But I feel that this is quite good, works quite well. I actually give it a good clean with alcohol at the end of the day after crafting anyway. So I've got some vellum here, and we're just going to play and see what we can come up with. So got our colours, we've got our alcohol, we've got our pump, and I'm going to start by just laying down some of these alcohols. Now I'm just going to, in the past when I've shown this, I've put like a circle of blends colour on my cardstock. But this time here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give this a bit more. This is probably not as controlled as I'd like to be. I tend to like to have quite a bit of control. So this is going to be a little bit more free. And again, I'm going to pop a little bit of colour on here. And a little bit of azure. And let's see what happens. So let's pop those all to one side. And I'm going to pick this up and work with this in my hand. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay some alcohol all the way around the outside edge of that and then just move it around. Now I can put a bit in the middle, but I'm just going to move that all around. You keep adding more alcohol if you want to. You can sort of use your pump there just to spray that alcohol moving. I'm not getting much movement there, so I'm going to pop some more on there. And we're just going to move that around. I don't want to blend those colours too much, but I'm going to use this pump just to move those colours around because I do want those colours to mix a little bit. I want a bit more alcohol up in here. So I just want to get some of that flowing. Now, by using the pump, it will dry it off. So if you want to get more colour down or get more of those lines in it, use your pump because it dries it out. And that's what's going to give you those lines. So just be careful with mixing. You don't want to have brown happening. Which I am getting a little bit of green and browns happening here. So I want to move that orange a little bit out. Or pumpkin pie, I should say. And I'm just going to give this a good pump. You could also get your heat gun on it, but just use your heat gun on a low setting. But I just want to get some of that colour, some of those lines, but not too much, but a little bit of blending happening. Now remember, with alcohol, if you're not happy with something, you can add more alcohol, add a bit more colour. And just keep working it until you've got it where you want. So that's not coming up too badly. Now I just want to add maybe a little bit more colour up in here. So I'm just going to add a bit more there. Maybe even a bit more of the Daffodil Delight. I'm going to add a little bit more. Now just remember, don't want to add too much alcohol at this point in time because I want it to spread, but I don't want to lose some of the other intensity that I have. So when you start adding more alcohol, you'll lose a little bit of, you'll lose whatever you've got there. So if you're happy with something, then don't touch it. So I've got a bit more orange happening there. But I do have those lines there. It has taken away a little bit of that wispiness, but that's okay. I'm quite happy with that still. So I just need to get this all dry. Now, if you used a heat gun to that, it could end up warping your vellum a little bit. So that's why I'm sort of really not wanting to use that heat gun too much because I am going to use it when I do my embossing. Now I've just got a little bit of a wet spot just here. If you hold up your piece of vellum, you will see some glossiness, and that's where it's still a little bit wet. That's just giving you much more of a wispier type of effect. So if I grab a piece of basic white cardstock, pop that on top, then that's the look that I'm getting there. So I'm actually quite happy with that because it's got the colours in it. It hasn't gone to mud, which is good. I've got a little bit of my blue in there, a little bit of greens in there with the two colours mixing. But yeah, I think that'll work quite well. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to grab my adhesive sheets, and like I did before, we're going to add adhesive sheets to our basic white cardstock. Now this cardstock, I've cut my vellum at 10.5 by 14.9, and I've cut my basic white cardstock at the same. So I'm just going to now adhere this down. Oops, just got to get that backing off that. Hello, Joan. How are you? Thank you for joining me today. Giving this a good rub down. So once we've done that, I'm now going to take the backing off that completely. So now I've got my adhesive sheet stuck onto there. Pop that into that bin. And we're going to grab our vellum like we did last time and adhere this down. Try not to rub it too much because that ink is just sitting on that surface. And if you rub it, you can smudge it, especially if your colours are very bright. Like something like Melon Mambo would be quite bright on that. Okay, now I do want to trim that down. But before I'm going to trim that down, actually no, I will trim it down now, I think. So I do want to trim this down to 9 by 13. Let me just double check. This is a piece of pumpkin pie, and I've cut this at 9.3 by 13. Let me just double check because I think I've done that too long. No, that's probably around about, might be a little bit too long. I've done that at 13.8. I think I could probably go at 13.7. Because I want to cut this piece at 9 by 13.5. So I'm just sort of working out, I like where, you need to work out where you'd like your design to be. So if I cut that, I need to trim a bit off here. I'm going to trim this off first. And that's sort of like right at that very edge. There's still some sticky on there. So if I cut that at 9, I'm going to be losing a lot of this, which is, I'm okay with that. So you need to just work out what portion of this design you want to have. So I'm quite happy with that. And now I want to cut this at 13.5. So the same sort of thing. I'm going to work out where I want to have this cut. And I'm looking at 13.5 is about there. And I'm just going to take it up a little bit. I want to take off the edge because that adhesive sheet is still sticking out a little bit. And I don't want stickiness on there. So that's sort of like on that very, very edge. So I need to tidy up all those edges anyway. And then 13.5 is going to be about there. So that's going to end up like that. So it's given me quite a nice front. Now you could leave that on there and just put a sentiment across it if you wanted to. You could, I was looking at other ideas of adding some of these sort of shapes on there. There's all sorts of things that you could add onto there, as far as maybe, you know, if you just wanted to add some die cut shapes and so forth on, you could do, you know, some stars or the ovals, and then, you know, like the black against that will just make it pop more. So there's lots of things there that you could do. But for this one here, I thought what we're going to try to do is another card like this one. Now, as I said, this one here, I don't know whether you can see the warping, but there's a little bit of warping. You can see that one just there. Now, that could be just because my glue didn't go right to the edge. And there's a little bit on here as well. And when I look really close, there's a little bit of warping in the actual vellum. And I think that happened when I hit this with the heat gun. And I'm going to try it at a lower heat this time, and just see if it makes it any difference. But, I mean, the thing is, it's a handmade card. And that, I think that just looks so effective as a handmade card. And that's not focusing. There we go. That's focusing now on that. So as soon as we hit this with the heat gun, you just got to be aware that it could warp your vellum a little bit. And because we've used adhesive sheets underneath it, the adhesive sheet could melt a little bit because we're hitting it with a heat gun. So that also could cause this to warp a little bit. Now I'm going to grab my embossing buddy, and I'm not going to rub this on it because, as I said before, that ink is just sitting on the surface. I just want to pat this down because I do not want any areas where that black embossing powder is going to stick. So I'm just pouncing that down on top, just making sure I've got really good coverage. I've got a little piece of copy paper here, and I have got my Versamark, and my stamp is right here. So this is quite a simple card, great card for male or female, birthdays, young, old. It could be a really 60s, 70s type card because of the design on it. But then, you know, it could be some, you know, for anyone really at any age. So I thought this is just quite a fun sort of retro type looking card. So now I'm going to stamp this, trying to line this up as best as I can in the middle. And I want that the darker lines at the top and whispering off feathery at the bottom. So I want to try to make sure this is nice and square. And we're just going to stamp straight down. Try to get as much as that Versamark onto our card as we possibly can. And there's that. Now I've got my big block here handy as well, because as soon as I have heat embossed this, I do want to pop this on top to see if we can keep it as flat as we can. So now I'm going to put my embossing powder on there. I want to make sure I get good coverage with the black powder. I've got a paintbrush here just to make sure that I've got any specks anywhere. I can just remove those. And once you're happy with that, I think that's pretty good coverage. Let's put our embossing powder away. Knowing me, I'll tip it everywhere. Or I'll melt it. Okay, so I've got my heat gun here. I'm going to apologise for any noise this could make, and I'm only going to pop this onto a low setting. Now I'm going to start off with on the front of it, but it may even work out better using the heat coming from the back. But I just want to be very aware that I've got two elements here that could warp, which is one's the vellum and the other is the glue. So just take your time in doing this, and you'll see this all change quite quickly once the heat starts working. And I'm just going to go in between the back and the front. It is taking its time because I do have this on a low setting, but it is starting to melt, and you can see that changing now. This is starting to heat up quite a bit, so just keep flipping it between back and front. You want to work this until all that matte black powder has turned a shiny black. Move it around a little bit so you're not getting your fingers too burnt. It's quite a bit of area here, so it is taking a little bit of time just to do this. Just giving that cardstock a little bit of a bend while I'm gently working this. And it's a little bit like magic watching this change. And that should be it. So I'm just going to, while that's still warm, just bend that back a little bit. Just making sure that I have got everything melted. Probably a little bit in here in this corner could be hit again, so let's just hit that quickly. Just double checking, making sure that all that powder is melted into a shiny black. And just giving that a little bit of a bend just to flatten that out. Okay, so there we are. That's our front of our card, and that should then adhere nicely onto this. Now I can see that it's probably warped a little bit in the fact that it's almost like it's shrunk a little bit, though it hasn't. I am going to trim this down, but I'm going to trim it down after I have glued it on. So I'm going to add some glue now to the back of this, and I want to add it as close as I can to the edges. You probably could put another adhesive sheet on there if you wanted to, but I do want it as close as I possibly can without it oozing out around those edges, because I don't want to make a mess. Gone to all this work in doing this. So I might pop a little bit more just in that section. Of course, you can use the wider end as well if you want to spread that glue out and around a bit. And then we're just going to adhere this onto our card base. So I'm just going to grab my block and pop it onto there. Just going to flip that the other way. Move this to one side for a second and just let that, probably put some more weight on there if you had more things that are a bit weighted. Let's pop that on there and see if that helps it a bit. And I've got a mess there on my mat. Let's grab our basic black card base, and I've cut that as a tent fold at 10.5 by 29.9 and scored it at 14.9. I have cut a card insert which is 10.5 by 14.4. I'm keeping this fairly simple. And we're just going to adhere that on the inside of our card. Just wondering whether just might put a sentiment in there. So I'm thinking maybe so happy to have you in my life. Could be just a nice little sentiment just to decorate the inside of this card. Now I am going to probably use just a little bit of just some memento to stamp that, because that's all I've got here handy. If you want, you could use any ink colour. Hello Kay, how are you? So we're just going to, normally I would stamp this before I glued it in, but hey, we're just going to add a little bit of something there. And what I might do is, this has got like a little set of little stamp here that's got stars on it. Just going to grab another block and very quickly, just behind me, I'm going to grab some pumpkin pie. No. Trying to find my pumpkin pie ink. It's gone walkabout. Daffodil Delight. And I know I haven't had it out. Crushed curry. Afternoon as you are. And I don't know where the pumpkin pie has gone. That's peach pie. I've got timber tiger, but it's the wrong colour. I don't use pumpkin pie very often, so it has definitely gone walkabout. Oh, that's interesting. Well, I've got here the Timid Tiger, so we might just use that instead of. And I was just thinking we could just add I cleaned up my desk, and if you saw my desk, you'd be disgusted in me because it is a right old mess. Just so you can see what I'm doing. And let's pop some Daffodil Delight. Actually, I might leave the azure afternoon off because if I put the azure on there, it's actually going to overtake the other colours. And I don't want to do it in two spots. So I think we're just going to leave that at that. What we could do is to give the azure, see if this fits down into there. No, it may not. Okay. Don't like doing this, but let's see if we can do. There we go. That's a better way to do the blue. So we'll just put a couple of flicks on there. So that's just given that a little bit of blue in there. And let's go back to working on our front. I'm just going to do that down. And let's have a look at this now that we've had that under a bit of weight. Yeah, it's rippled there a little bit. So I'm not quite sure whether that is just the glue. Maybe if you use the adhesive sheet, it might make that flatter. I do just want to trim off a little bit of this edge on this side because it's just a little bit too wide. Just taking off a smidgen, not too much. So there's that. So now we'll pop some glue onto here. If you wanted to, you could pop this up on with dimensionals, but I'm just popping it all down. And I've put lots of glue on there because, again, I want to put that weight back on. So I just want to pop that back onto there just to hold that down while I close that up. Just let that dry for a second or two. So I hope you've all had a good week. We've got a long weekend this weekend, which will be great. Hoping we might go for a bit of a drive down the coast. Okay, so there's my card. As I said, it has warped a little bit now. That could be just the heat gun on the vellum, and having that basic white with the sandwiched with the adhesive sheet on the inside. That could cause that to warp that little bit. But look, I mean, it's a handmade card, and you know, you spent that time on creating something quite pretty. So I'm sure no one is going to matter too much about that. It's probably just me being a little bit more pedantic, but it's just a fun way of playing. And I think this is what I try to tell people each week when I do something like this, whether I'm doing it with watercolour pencils or whether I'm doing it with inks or watercolour paper. Play. See what you can come up with. Try different techniques like I did this morning. Just playing with all of these pieces of vellum and just creating different techniques, seeing what you can come up with, seeing, this one here could work really good. One of our new suites has got the palm trees in it. Pop some palm trees on that and see what you can come up with as a card. You don't have to stamp directly onto the vellum. You can, stamp your sentiment, of course, onto a piece of cardstock and then attach it onto the front. So it's just a matter of playing, trying out new techniques, see how this all works. This one here was air dried. These ones here were dried with the pump. The pump really close, the pump a bit further away. The other week when we did this and I was showing you how to create these little bubbles and everything. So, playing with, you could have something like this and then create lots of, because there's still lines and everything on there, but enhance those lines by making those little bubbles. Seeing what you can do and what looks good. Don't throw these bits and pieces away. Die cut them. This one here, I could die cut leaves out of these sections here. And it could be a great effect. You could do a big sheet of all this sort of thing and then die cut it into all sorts of things. Of course, something like a die cut leaf is really good if it's got detail in it, and it'll really show up nicely. But just remember, being vellum, you're going to have a see-through effect with it. So if you're going to be layering vellum, make sure that you use some sort of adhesive that's not going to show through, or you have your adhesive in darker areas, whatever. But just play. And that's what today is all about. It's just playing. If you don't like something, add more alcohol to it. See what you can come up with. Try it again using something else. Flip it over, stamp on the opposite side and die cut the flower out of it. I mean, this could make a really interesting flower. What I've done here is I've taken a bit of basic white cardstock and stamped the flower on there and then sort of pop that underneath to see, okay, if I was going to cut that out, what section would I want? How are they going to look on those petals? Do I want it more dark in the middle or lighter in the middle? Or this one over here with more, you've got a white bit there. Sort of play around and see what it comes up like. But when it comes to stamping, flip it over and stamp on the wrong side. It will mean that this side here becomes your right side, so your colours aren't going to be as vibrant. But, play with it. See what you come up with and share with me what you found. But don't throw these pieces away once you've finished with them. As I said, you can die cut them. You can cut them up and make them into backgrounds. You can keep playing with them and working on them. But this is just, I found this today just a really fun way to create backgrounds. 2 cards done very similarly, but they both look completely different. So have fun with this technique and have a play with it. There's always things you can improve on. There's always things that I can improve on. I've got to find a better way of getting this to sit down without all that little bit of buckling happening. But in other words, I'm quite happy with that. I mean, I can pick it to pieces and I'm already saying things, I didn't quite get enough. Get rid of all the powder that's in between some of those letters. But look, it's a handmade card at the end of the day, and all those little imperfections really show that it's been made with love, of course, but it's been made by hand for somebody. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Otherwise, I will just keep rambling on. I hope you have a lovely weekend. I hope the weather is nice for you, and if you're here in Australia, you get to enjoy Australia Day. So take care, and we'll catch up with you next week, and we might try something a bit different again. See you later. Bye for now.